Yeah, dinosaur. Dinosaurus Rex. All of that is good. We are live. It is 1:52. I haven't been on in a little bit, a couple of days, I think, a day and a half or something like that. Hopefully everybody's doing well. Today, the subject for our discussion on Let's Talk Tech is torque. So let's talk torque. How do we gain more torque? And I did an interesting comparison that a lot of people, I get these questions a lot, but more often than not, I answer, hey, that video is already up and you can actually take a look at that. So people talk about the stock motors and wanting more torque. And if you take a look at a comparison that I did between a 4.8, a 5.3, and a 6.0, just all stock. And the nice thing is, and as a little backstory, I didn't ever run all of these motors on the same day and on the same dyno and all that stuff. So you could take the dyno results for what they are. Luckily, I've run so many of them that I know what the variances are between them and usually what the reasons for the variances are. Some of them, I run a lot of junkyard motors. I've gotten a lot of them. And we usually start off with that on the LS stuff. We start off with some sort of junkyard motor, whether it's 4.8 or 5.3, and then we upgrade from there. So we'll start off with a stock one, fingers crossed that it's a good running motor and not a broken nightmare. But most of them are good. So I get them from the wrecking yard, we put them on the dyno, we run them, and then we start doing some series of upgrades, whether are we testing camshafts and we put springs in it? If we're doing that, test a variety of different camshafts. Are we testing cylinder heads? Are we testing intake manifolds? Are we putting turbos on it? Nitrous, blowers, whatever. The answer to all of that is usually yes. But the good thing about all of those series of testing over the years is that we start with something that's stock. So we'll take a 4.8, we'll take it from the wrecking yard, we'll put it on the dyno. It has oil pressure, that's good. It's hitting on all the cylinders and working. And especially this is the case if we get them from a running vehicle that maybe was crashed, hopefully in the back. Because that's another thing. I had a comment from a guy today that was talking about an engine that he had the engine was damaged, the cylinder heads were damaged, and it broke a bolt or broke one of the mounting gears or something off it. And I'm like, I'm a little leery of things that are in the wrecking yard because they were in a crash. Obviously, hopefully that nobody was hurt. But in terms of the parts on the car, that if it's hit from the front and it's crushed in the front of the car enough that it damaged something on the engine, that's an engine I wouldn't use. If it was enough to break a cylinder head or part of a cylinder head or even the accessories and stuff, I'm just really leery of distortions to the block and stuff. And so that's not normally something that I would run. I don't like stuff that's hit from the front. The ideal situation is, and I don't like ones that aren't damaged because then is it in there because it has a bad motor, or is it a transmission, or is it something else? Then you're just kind of guessing because you don't have any history behind it. Like I said, the ideal situation, I crashed from the back, they totaled the car, the engine was running when it was in that altercation. And so hopefully they still run good. But we take them, we get them from the wrecking yard, pull them out, clean them off, hopefully put them on the dyno, put headers on it, put a Mazir electric water pump on it with no accessories, and then run it on the dyno. And then that is always our starting point. I like to have that because if we put the motor up on the dyno or make a bunch of modifications before we do that, before we put it up on the dyno and it's not working, we don't know what to identify. We don't know what to point to. Is it the cam we put in? Is it the lifters that we put in? Is it the push rods? Is it the cylinder heads? Is it the blower, the turbo, the nitrous? What the heck is it? This way, starting off with stock combinations, we go, okay, look, we have a good starting point. This motor is in good working order. All the cylinders are hitting. It has a nice power curve through the whole RPM range. We have optimized the air fuel. We've optimized the timing, and it's a good runner. Having run dozens of each of these, I can tell you, looking at the power curve, yes, that's indicative of what these things do. We don't always know exactly like, oh, that one might be down 5 or 10 or whatever, but that the curve is still pretty good. It's just down everywhere. Okay, that one's maybe a little softer than others. Oh, that's a good one because it's up in the range that we normally associate with the better ones. And so we can take a look at, and as a starting point, this is a good idea because then I also have a bunch of stuff to compare. So we can take a look at comparisons between the 4.8 and 5.3 and we can compare them all directly. And one of the things that people like about these is that, oh, no, we don't want to end. I was clicking the wrong button. One of the things that people like about these starting points is we then now get to compare what they did stock for stock. So what does a 4.8 do? What does a 5.3 do? What does a 6.0 do? And we know that from, factory power ratings, depending on what exact year it is and what exact applications, and we have different versions of the 5.3 and different versions of the 4.8 and different versions of the 6.0. They had different camshafts and compression, LQ4, LQ9, those kinds of things. But at least it's a good idea to, I can put all these together and compare them directly. And what people seem to be most interested in is, what is the torque production? What do I gain from putting the bigger motor in? And I have these kinds of comparisons as from all the dyno results. And it's pretty interesting. So if we take a look at a 4.8 liter, we see that a typical 4.8 liter makes around 330 horsepower. 333 is a really good one for this one. It makes peak power a little bit higher than the 5.3 or the 6 liter, partly because it's smaller, not because the short stroke loves to rev or the short stroke has to rev. You guys can argue about which one of those that you think it is, but run with the same cylinder heads and camshaft and intake manifold and compression as the 5.3, it produces peak power a little bit higher because, relatively speaking, it has better airflow versus its displacement. It has more cam timing versus its displacement, and intake manifold versus its displacement. And so it wants to make power a little bit higher because it's a smaller motor. In this instance, we had 333 horsepower at 5,500. I've had some in the mid to high 220s. I don't know if I've had, maybe 335 is probably about the most I've had from one from the wrecking yard. And it made peak horsepower at 5,500. It made 343 foot-pounds of torque. This is a good indication. Again, we've talked about it. If it makes more torque than horsepower, it is by definition a mild combination, and the stock one is a mild combination. And it made peak torque of 343 foot-pounds at 4,700 RPM. So if we compare that to a 5.3, the 5.3 is basically better everywhere except at the very top, out by 6,500. And I don't know why you'd want to rev it to 6,500 on these stock ones, because they make peak power. One of them makes it at 5,500. But the 5.3 makes 353 horsepower. So this one was about 20 better, but at 5,200 RPM. So it made more power, but did so at an earlier RPM range, 5,200 versus 5,500 for the 4.8 liter. Naturally, it made a lot more torque. It made 300. This one made 384 foot-pounds. So this was good. This one was pretty good on the torque curve at 4,300. So again, 400 RPM less than the 4.8 liter. And we see gains of down low. The lower that we go, the better the torque advantage is for the bigger motor. We see gains of 40, 50 foot-pounds down low, and even down at 2,500, it was about 50 foot-pounds of torque. So that's the reason that, guys, when I tell people, hey, look, if you're going to get a motor and you're wanting something that is for a truck application and you want torque, get the bigger motor. Also get the bigger motor, because if you're looking at this in terms of turbo response, you have an extra 50 foot-pounds of torque at 2,500 or even lower than that. You're going to have more boost response, because the stroke has nothing to do with that. The revability, none of that has anything to do with that. It's all about how much power, how much torque production we have from the NA motor versus the turbo size. That's what's going to determine the response rate of the turbo. So if you put the same turbo on this 5.3 that makes more torque everywhere at 2,000 off idle to 1,000, 2,000, 2,500 RPM, it's going to have better boost response. We see this even more so when we look at the 6 liter. So we look at the 6 liter, it actually makes peak power at the same RPM, peak horsepower and peak torque at the same RPM as the 5.3, but it makes 400 horsepower, or a little over 400 horsepower, at the same 5,200 RPM. So it's up about 50 horsepower over the 5.3, and 439 foot-pounds of torque. So it's up 40, 16, 56 foot-pounds or so, 55, 56 foot-pounds at the same 4,300 RPM. So the curve looks a lot like the 5.3 does. It's just elevated everywhere. But if we compare a 6.0 to a 4.8, we're looking at, 100 foot-pounds of torque in some areas. It's a lot. And especially down low, it's going to be near 100 foot-pounds better, especially in the guys always talk about the low RPM ranges. Oh, from 2000, which is essentially be, since these are truck applications, that would essentially be the stall converter. So from the stall converter up to, the torque range, 2000 to 3000 RPM or 3500, the 6.0 is going to have an advantage of 100 foot-pounds of torque. And this continues when we put camshafts in these things. The thing is that if we put the same camshaft in all of these, you put a Truck Norris or a NSR cam or the one of Super Richie's low buck trucks or whatever, if we put a camshaft in these things, they respond slightly differently. So the bigger 5.3 and 6.0, the camshaft is relatively smaller, especially on the 6.0. So what you'll get is you'll start getting bigger gains earlier in the RPM range with the same cam on a 6.0 as you would on a 4.8. The 4.8 is going to get gains at the top, and it will help make a lot more power. But down low, the crossover point for the trade-off where you're losing power versus gaining power is going to be at a higher RPM on the 4.8 and a lower RPM on the 6.0. So the camshaft, you can effectively get away with a bigger camshaft if you want to produce the same thing on a 6.0 as you did on a 4.8. So camshaft choice becomes important, and you have more leeway basically with the bigger motor. So if you have 6.0, you can put good, pretty good sized camshafts in it. You're going to get big gains at the top and everywhere else, but you're also going to start getting those gains earlier in the RPM range. So if we put this low buck truck or a Truck Norris or a Red Hot or a Hot Rod cam, if we put any of those on a 6.0, you're going to start getting gains from those camshafts earlier than you will on a 4.8. A 4.8, like I said, the putting cams in a 4.8 is kind of tricky business. In my opinion, they need to make smaller cams for the 4.8 so that guys can start getting gains earlier in the RPM range. You're still going to get big power gains at the top. I mean, it's not unusual for a camshaft like a Truck Norris or those kinds of things for you to get 40, 50, 60 horsepower gains. And that's a lot. That would be noticeable. But the problem is that if you do that on a 4.8 and you don't get those gains, start getting gains at 2000 or 2500 or even 3000 RPM, and you step on the gas and your converter goes from 2000 RPM. So from 2000 to 3000, you get a loss. So that when you step on the gas, that's what you notice is a loss in power on a 4.8. And then if you're only running it to 5500, like in a truck application, you don't see big gains there. I mean, you'll definitely see some at 5500, but you've got to wait till it revs all the way out. And then really you get really good gains at 6500 on a 4.8, but you've got to reprogram all this for usually on the tune for a cam swap anyway, but you also have to have a good guy reprogram the transmission. And then the question becomes, do you want your 4L60E hard shifting at 6500 RPM, where the gains you're going to get from a camshaft in a 4.8, where they're going to be really, really noticeable? And then the question is, okay, well, if I've done that on a 4.8 and all my power is up there, do I now want a converter? The answer to that is probably yes, especially if you're doing this with the performance thing. But the other option would be just to put a bigger motor in it, because in both of these instances, on a 4.8, going from a 4.8 to a 5.3 or a 6.0, especially like a 6.0, and this is why guys want them, and this is why wrecking yards charge more money for them. They probably didn't make as many 6.0s as they did these smaller motors, so availability would definitely be pricing, and then desirability also would be pricing. But having an extra 100 foot-pounds of torque is definitely a noticeable deal. So if you're trying to put together a combination where you can just, spin the tires at will, obviously, as we usually find out, bigger is always better. But it's an interesting comparison. And I think I have 6.2 stuff there too. And again, 6.2 is going to be better than the 6.0. And a lot of the 6.2 stuff, especially if we compare a 6.2 LS3, Now it has a big change in stuff. So it has more compression. It has a much better cylinder head, and it has a much better camshaft than any of these truck motors. So it's way up. I mean, it's when we run a 6.2L-LET'S3, a stock one, it makes like 490 or 495 horsepower. So already it's up like almost it's 80, 90 horsepower compared to a regular truck 6-liter. It makes more torque. It's bigger. Because it makes 485 foot-pounds. So it's up 40 foot-pounds of torque. It has all of the things that make it better. It has displacement, compression, head flow. It has better intake manifold. It really just has all of the things that would make it better. And it's not, it's not totally a fair comment or a comparison looking at a performance car application versus a truck application, but it gives you an idea. Hey, look, this one is like this much better because not only does it have displacement, like in our comparison between a 4.8, a 5.3, and a 6.0, but it has everything else too, which makes it better. Let's see what you guys got going on this morning. Queensland in the house. Sunday fun day. Yes. Yo, 6.4 Hemis in the house. Good. We like Hemis too. We speak Hemi here. Turbos with electric wastegates. Okay. I'm all for that. I don't know what that does, but if you can control I guess you can control your desired boost level. One of the interesting things about wastegates is, and I got a question today about them, and that's somebody asking about, hey, we want you to do some testing on a centrifugal blower with a wastegate, and you turn the boost up with a pulley or whatever. I'm like, you haven't seen pulley tests on centrifugal blowers, because if you do a pulley test on a centrifugal blower, the gain that you get down at 2,000 RPM is not very much from a pulley change. The gain that you get at 6,500 or 7,000 RPM is a lot from a pulley change. But you're not going to get you're not all of a sudden from a pulley change going to see, like if you're running 15 pounds at the top, you're never going to see 15 pounds down low. You can't pulley it enough to do that. Because if you use the math and multiply the change in blower speed versus the pulley change and then the internal step and then the RPM, you're never going to get there. So it is better if you pulley it so that it makes more boost and then trim it off at the top if that's what you want to do. But honestly, you're putting a pulley in it would just be better because then you'd have a little bit more down low where you're trying to wastegate it before you're trying to wastegate it, but you would just have more at the top too. So, I mean, I guess I understand guys trying to do that, but the guys that I get most of the comments from, I don't think have tried that and don't understand the science behind it, because they think that you'll make your centrifugal into a turbo or a root style blower by doing that. And that's just not reality. I'll be back. Got to walk Thunder and Lightning too. I'd love to know what the new C8 Z06 motor will be. I'd be happy with a twin turbo 4.8. Would be great, but a 6.2 would be better. Yeah, I don't know about the Z06 motor. That's beyond me. Bought a 2019 Gen 5 Stage 2 Whipple Supercharged F-150. Congratulations on your purchase. That sounds like a cool one. C8 uses an LT6, I believe, which is an overhead cam engine like the C4 with the LT5 in the 90s. Yeah, the new one's is probably going to be pretty stout. Almost done. Turbo Sentra, almost done building the VQ35. Now I just need to find a transmission. Extra 120 horsepower over the MR20 DE will be nice. Yes, extra horsepower, always a good idea. The guy was losing it to the bank, so he let me buy out his loan. Okay, cool. So you're just paying what's owed on it? Always yes to a stock converter, even with a stock cam. You're making 260 with MR20 DE. I got a backup Gen 3 Coyote block and was thinking of Voodoo heads and forged internals. You had to do a Google search on the MR20 DE. Yeah, it's not, obviously not nearly as famous as a SR20. LQ9 with an LS3 cam is aggressive for the 4.8. 6 liter versus a Coyote vid. I have a 6.2 versus a Coyote video already up because those two were actually the real competitors. They were the marketplace competitors because the Mustang had a Coyote. This was like in 2011, I think is when the intersection of those two was. The Mustang had a Coyote and the Camaro had an LS3. So those were the two engines of choice that they had for that year, and that makes a better comparison. E-gates let you program in dome pressure without using CO2. Yeah, no, I know how they work. My point is that a lot of people think that wastegates, programmable, electronic, or however you're doing it, change the way that the turbo spools up. It doesn't. The turbo spool is a function of the power output and the turbo side. The power output of the NA motor and the turbo size. You can just shut the gate entirely and not have it open at all ever, and it's still going to that response rate is still going to be a function of the NA power and the turbo. All the gate does then is let you program what happens during gate actuation. So if you can hold it closed, you'll get that response rate of a completely closed gate, and that's good. And then you can get it to, you can dial in whatever boost curve you want after that if you have that sort of programmability. Then you can make it have a rising curve or a falling curve or a flat curve, whatever you want. That's all good. But my point is that there's a lot of confusion about what wastegates do. And the only way that they change response is right near the gate opening point if they can hold it closed. But everything below that is not gate related. It has nothing to do with that. If the gate is shut, all the response rate when the gate is shut is all just engine and turbo sizer. 3.5 hour ride on my Z50. That's a long time, man. A stock LQ4, LQ9, plus an LS1 cam wouldn't be radical in a 4.8. It's small. An LS1 camshaft, even in a 5.3, loses power through much of the curve compared to the stock camshaft, compared to the LM7 camshaft. So I've tested that, and it would be even worse on a 4.8. It would definitely lose power. Definitely lose a fair bit of power. So if I look at that, I got we'll do the stock camshaft. Then I'll do an LS1 camshaft. So the LS1 compared to the LM7 camshaft loses power to 4,300. 4,400. Then beyond that, it's better, but below that, it's less. And on a 4.8, that would be much higher. That would be, I don't know, between 4,500 and 5,000, where this LS1 cam would make less power. So for a truck application, that wouldn't be a good deal on a 4.8 because it would lose power through most of the usable curve. We'd love to see a comparison of oilless turbo versus traditional versus oilless air-cooled. What is an air-cooled turbo? Are the 90s Caprice wagons worth anything? That would just be an individual choice. Do you like them? Do you think that they're cool? Like the Buick Roadmasters and stuff? I happen to like them, especially when they're lowered and stuff. Anything on the 6.6 GM engine by swapping 6 heads to delete direct injection? No, I've not done anything like that. I don't know why you'd go to all of that trouble rather than just putting together an LS or an LS stroker. It seems like that would be a less expensive route. Be on the lookout for a Studebaker Lark. Yeah, from Calvin. Yeah, I have announced that before. Richard, when I go to purchase my head gaskets, is there anything I should be aware of? Stock 2004 6 liter to stock 243 head. Do I just buy 04 set of head gaskets? Yeah, the head gaskets are interchangeable, so that's not going to be a problem. You just need something that has that right bore size, and that's what we do when we choose head gaskets. We choose it based on the bore size, and then secondarily on the thickness of the head gasket that we want. I just got a TSP 408, nice stroker, FIS 94102. My buddy keeps telling me the 408 isn't ideal for boost. Is that true? That's not true. A 408 is good. You just don't need a 408 to run a boosted combination. The turbo normally dictates how much power it is. The displacement is going to help you dictate how much response rate you have. And the thing that worries me about a 408 is the bore size and then sleeve strength. Any dyno test with an increase in stroke? Yeah, that's what the 4.8 and the 5.3 that I was just talking about, that's what that is. Because the only difference between a 4.8 and a 5.3, they have the same block and the same pistons. They, I mean, one of them is a flat top and one of them is a dish, but they have the same compression, but they have a change in stroke length. What size stall would you put in a turbo 350 and made it to a 4.8 with a truck Norris cam? I think 3,000 or something. %, agree about what you said about the wastegates. Yeah, the wastegates are great, and have an electronic one would be cool. So that I would like to be able to dial in the curve that I want, like when we're doing stuff for the Big Bang deal, so we can have a nice rising curve. But we can create that though with an electronic controller, you know, up to a point. What cams would you say are appropriate for a Whipple Charged Gen 3 Coyote? All of them. You can run any camshaft with a Whipple Supercharged Coyote. You can run stock ones, you can run aftermarket ones, whatever you want. My 4.8 4L60E stock using 1800 stall in a classic Silverado. Yeah, that should be the stock stall speed. If you're relying on springs to keep your gate shut and you want to leave on 10 psi, but then start opening at 2 psi, how can you leave on 10 and then start opening at 2? Why would you start? I don't understand why you would do that. Wouldn't CO2 help keep the gate closed until 10 psi, resulting in better spool time? You're missing the point. When the gate's closed, the wastegates don't do anything. Okay, if the gate is completely closed and cannot have any back pressure bypassing through the gate, when it's closed, the spool rate is only a function of the turbo and the power output of the motor. A good rule of thumb is 500 RPM over max torque for a stall speed. So in a stock 5.3, you'd want a 5,200 RPM stall. Is that what you're talking about? Blue collar, I don't think any of the LS1 cams were the same as the LM7 camshaft. But they did have ones that were they did have some that were the same as the truck cam. And the truck cam would lose power versus the stock one too. Let's see here. Get rid of LS1. There we go. Oh, that's why. I was wondering why that did so well. That says LS9. That's LS9 is not what we want. The LQ9 camshaft. I need to look and see what the The LQ9 was the one that we tested was a 196, 201, 467, 479. That's the LS1 cam. So that was better from 4,300 on up. Lost power below 3,100. Was listening to your live, working on my 5.3, typed error. So oilless versus oil-cooled versus water-cooled turbos. I don't think you're going to see any difference in power between a water-cooled turbo and an oil-cooled turbo, at least the way that we run them on the engine dyno, versus oilless, if the turbo is exactly the same. I don't think you're going to, I think that all of that is more for longevity. I have a Suburban that needs a new engine. I was thinking about going for a fuel economy build. So would you get a 3800 or Maribera either with a turbo? What year Suburban? You're going to do a V6 or an inline 6 in it? I would think that a 4200 could get better mileage maybe. Someone tried telling me the 109 LSA is too tight for boost, but your tests say otherwise. The LSA has that number by itself is 100% irrelevant. It doesn't tell you anything about it. The valve events tell you what's happening. Is it a 109 LSA with 191 degrees of duration at 50? Or is it a 109 LSA with 247 degrees of duration at 50? You know, there's a lot. Is it a single pattern cam? Is it a wide split dual pattern cam? All of these things. Is it advanced? Is it a +3 or +5? Is it a -4 or -8? I mean, there's a lot of things that would go into that. But yeah, Dylan, who's ever telling you that as an absolute does not know what they're talking about. 4.6 2-valve versus 4.6 4-valve versus 5.4 4-valve. Yeah, those would be similar. I don't have direct comparisons of those. Any difference in performance due to rod length in a 6-liter? All of the LSs have the same rod length except for the 4.8. And excessive, the change in rod length that I've seen from most of the aftermarket stuff, it's a 6.098 versus a 6.125. I doubt you'd even be able to measure that. I swear I read that the 01 LS1 got the LQ4, LQ9 cam. Well, the early LQ4s got the LM7 camshaft when they started putting the LS6 intake manifold on them. Aside from rod strength, why the difference in pin heights? Just so that you could put the different pin heights, just so that you could put different rods in them. Because not very many people, well, some people now are making aftermarket 6.098 rods that are the same length as the stock one. But a 6.125 was something that guys were already building rods for. Richard, I have a 99 to 06 5.3, and I'm doing a GPI low lift cam, stage 2 with long tube headers and 243 heads is a good combo. Yeah, that should be fun. I don't know exactly what the duration specs are on that camshaft, but I would have a better idea if you told me what that is. I was racing on the weekend and had issues warming my nitrous bottle. Do you see an issue with me buying a battery, heat gun, and using that to? Yeah, I think that's a terrible idea. You're localizing the heat that you're putting into the bottle. That's this heat gun would be the same as using a torch, and that's not a good idea. You should get a bottle heater blanket. Guys do it, but I don't like that idea. Does everyone Everyone want more low-speed torque for a truck application. That'll be our poll. That'll be our polio. Use a torch on the no prep cars. Yep. I've seen a lot of that. I just walk away when they're doing that. I noticed with a lot of the way that we do it at Westech, that's the way that I like it the best, but it's not something that's, I mean, it's something you could do if you had a generator and stuff, which a lot of race trailers do. But the guys at Westech have basically a water bath that's plugged in. They have it plugged into 110. You could do it on something else, and it's, you know, smaller than the full length of the bottle, let's say, and it's got a little cage inside there with a heater element, and they heat the water up to about 100 degrees and set the bottle in there, and they take it out every once in a while, and we shake it around just to try to mix stuff up so that you could get the surface, the heated surface area, but it heats it up evenly, and then we just see the temperature or the pressure increase in the bottle, and Brule likes to go to 92 or 93 degrees, and we see the corresponding change in the bottle pressure, and then that seems to work really well. I don't know that that's possible for guys that are racing out on the street. I noticed with a lot of the LS cams, exhaust lift duration is lower than the intake, which is so much different than what I usually see. Why is this? I've never seen, I don't see very much lift. I see lower exhaust lift, but duration, I don't see very many reverse pattern cams, and I don't really see many reverse pattern cams working well because I don't know why they would. Our no prep car is almost 100% shot of nitrous, 110% shot of nitrous. Yeah, but that doesn't change the bottle heating method. I think most people do want the more torque. I don't want something that is lazy below 4,500, but I'm not one of these off idle guys. Yeah, you buy a diesel if you want off idle. I don't remember seeing anyone heating up nitrous bottles in the track back in the 80s and 90s. Turn the bottle on, hit the button, and go. Whatever happened. Well, it is better if you have the more pressure that you have, the more nitrous delivery you'll have, because that's what pressure does. But because everybody wants the big hit, and paying attention to that is a good idea. And obviously, they've been selling bottle heaters for a really, really long time. These little blankets and stuff. Which aftermarket brand rotating assemblies are still around? Summit Racing has lots of stuff. But you know, Scat has stuff, which I like the Scat stuff. I've used that in the past on lots and lots of different stuff, small block Chevys and big block Chevys and all that, and all that's been really good. K1, Weisco, JE, all of those guys have stuff. Cam specs are, I don't know what any of those numbers. I don't know what the XA. I don't know what any of those numbers are. So is it a 212, 220? What is what you're saying? Yeah, 212, 220 would be a good street cam. I want to retard a cam at all my engines now after retarding in my Z50 because it helped to make more top end. You know, of course, that because it worked on one combination, that's not a universal thing. But I'm glad it worked on the Z50 because you're all about that top end. What was odd was I was talking about camshaft for a naturally aspirated combination. It's a single pattern, 207, 525. And Dylan, what kind of motor was that for? Shadow Ops got your 5.7L-LET'S going together. The 5.7L-LET'S. We try to keep the bottle a decent temperature, but the sun goes down, ambient drops. Yeah. Yep. And I'm sure you guys have, do you guys have run pressure gauges on the bottles? I would think so at that level. If tuned correctly, the bottle needs to be at the pressure it was tuned at. Are you worried about a change in air-fuel ratio? I didn't hear the bottle on the first run, and the bottle pressure was only 600 psi for bottle pressure. That's almost an empty bottle. Lost the boost reference line on the Corvette yesterday. Thank goodness for the boost safeties on the Holley EFI. That just saved my bottom end. Those are important to put in there when you're tuning. Engine RPM and boost cutouts are are critical for, especially for high horsepower turbo stuff. If you pull 1 degree of timing for a third of a second off the hit and then roll into the power, you need the bottle pressure to be at 950, not 800, not 1200. You need 950. Are you doing that for traction then? That was for your 5.7 Hemi. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back and see at 207, 525 lift. Yeah. I mean, there are better camshafts than that. Watched an interesting video of Nissan variable compression engine teardown yesterday. That is cool. So how are they getting it? Were they varying the? I've seen eccentrics on the connecting rod to bring the piston down. Saab, I think, had a thing where they cantilevering the head or something weird. Thinking of ordering one of those $59 eBay combo kits, 1500 horsepower wastegate and a 500 shot of nitrous. Yeah, that should work perfect together, right? There should be nothing ever wrong with that. Trying to catch up on the video some. 408 stroker, rec port heads, 219 cam, LS3 intake, 9.5 to 1, stock truck manifolds. I don't know. I would have to look something up that would be similar to that. What did the... No, that has really good heads on it, though. Let's see if I got something that would be of interest here. Stroker madness. Let's go. It's too easy. Let's see here. The 219. I don't think we have a 219 cam. But we do have something that's in between those two, or can put something in between those two. 206, 224 is a lot. So I'm thinking stock truck. Is it stock truck exhaust manifolds? It's in low to mid 500s, maybe. I have a Howard's cam in the block that might give me a better power production, but I wanted something mild. I'll go look for the Howard specs. What are my opinions on carbureted LS motors? Guys use them all the time, and I've got lots of videos up on testing different carbureted combinations. Dupree, welcome. I plan on running twin turbos, but we'll be running NA till I can afford the turbo setup. Does anyone run 4-inch stroke in a 6-liter with stock rods and pistons? You can't do that. That won't work. You need to have when you add stroke, you need to have the rod, and most importantly in this case, because they make stroker kits with a stock rod length, but you have to have the piston pin in the right position in the in the piston, because otherwise the piston will stick out of the top. Speaking of torque converters, I have a small cam in my LQ4. I swapped in a 3000 to 3200. It definitely wants more. Has me wishing I'd gone to a 4000 stall. Gary, gas over diesel use variable. I'm sure that's what variable compression for starting 80 years ago with a rod through the head. That's not good. I don't think it's supposed to do that, right? I see a cam and a lamp. They need to become one. The lamp cam, that would be good. Renault prep car did 1100 wheel horsepower motor. Was it some kind of big block or something? Such a lazy setup in preparation for the nitrous. Did you guys have did you have low compression on that? And did you have a bunch of chamber volume and head port so that you could put a whole bunch of nitrous in it? April 20th, Circle D Specialties is having an open house brunch, factory tour, and car show. I just recently picked up a 2008 Yukon. It has a 6.2. Does this engine do what? That engine's good. Do you have any good Nitrous 4.8 LS camshafts yet? I have, yes, I do. All of the cams I have are all Nitrous cams. Let's talk about what you want the cam to do before you run the Nitrous. Dupree, if you want more power from your 05 Z71, and it's not a 4x4, from your 5.3, tune, obviously, long tube headers, but camshaft and springs are the biggest thing. What are some of the highest mileage bottom ends you've seen on the dyno? I know we've done stuff that we know has had more than 250,000 on it. Some of them we don't know what the mileage was, because I've run lots of early ones, both 4.8s and 5.3s. Mine's got 330,000 on it, and I wouldn't surprise me if some of the other ones that we've run were like that. Basically, it is in the same family of upgrades and conversions you're having. Barton, small block forward, but less than zero timing. It's not good without the juice. You have a small block Ford making 1100 at the tire? That's NA? Dylan, 231, 237. That should be a powerful camshaft. Rotated shaft, moving the link point, which has 3 to 4 link systems between the shaft to the crank to the piston. Okay. Doing a swap, a 4.8 liter into an E90 BMW, a T56 trans, want to run a 200 shot on it. Are you wanting the 4.8 to rev? Like how much power? What do you want the power curve to look like on the 4.8? And what else is done to the 4.8 that's helping you make power? Are you just doing a cam swap on an otherwise stock 4.8, like with a stock truck intake manifold and stock heads and stuff? Ben, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. Eric, it is nice outside. It's pretty. It looks sunny today. How's our poll doing? 89%. Does everyone want more low-speed torque for a truck? 11% saying no. Scott, I want a 408 Recport 823s, truck Norris cam, 9.5 to 1, LS3 intake, and need help picking a single turbo for an 85 El Camino. Want a pump gas setup, streetable. Can this work? Yes, it can. 9.5 to 1 is a reasonable amount of compression. And you have a truck Norris cam in it, which seems a little on the small side for a 408 maybe, but it will work. Depending on how much power you want, the power output is going to dictate how much turbo you're going to put on there. You should be thinking S475, 7875 Gen 2, something in that range, which is going to be 1,000 or less. Gary, a VVT will change dynamic compression because it is changing cam timing. Extreme Energy 270 in a 302 with long tubes and stock heads and EFI, but upgraded springs and rockers, looking at 70 or more horsepower. You're not going to get 70 horsepower gain from a camshaft swap in a 302 Windsor with stock heads. I've never seen anything like that. Even the 274 cam was only worth about 35 with stock heads on it. Stock 706, flat top, stock bottom end, dual plane intake, 650L Brock, 1406. Okay, I want to run it. You want to run a 200 shot on that? Did you put you're putting ring gap in that, right? And a 200 shot will be a pretty good bit on that. What camshaft do you have? Or that's what you're asking for, is a camshaft, right? The two cams that I have right now, you can pick between those two. A low buck truck, or the slightly one step bigger than that. Because you have a manual trans, I think you said. Yeah, you could go to the bigger camshaft and rev this thing a little bit. Worry the piston to valve clearance might be an issue on the Howard's unit, but for some reason the Eagle heads will allow more clearance. Is the valve drop different on the Eagle heads than it is on the earlier heads? They may be farther up in the chamber or something. I just don't know. But the chamber size themselves might not dictate the valve drop. Did they change the valve angle on the heads or anything? Should I cam up? Don't need 4-digit power, but Scott, what is your If you want to make more NA power, certainly on a 408, take a look at the 175 horsepower video that I have up where we ran a stock cam, a 206 cam, a 224, a 232, 239 on the 408. And you can kind of see where we go for different cam specs. So give you an idea of, just look at the intake duration and get a fairly good idea on what's going to happen, and pick which one of those power curves that you would want. Yes, you're going to gap the rings. Okay. Yeah, excessive. Let me know what happens when you guys take your deal out. That's pretty fast. Yeah, ATV, send me an email. New poll for the most horsepower. A would be more boost. B would be less boost. I can't do an A or B. I can only do a yes or no. Can I run a roots blower on a 6.0 without changing the crank or pistons? Yes, you can. We've run 1,500 horsepower on a stock 6.0 on a stock bottom end. But the one thing we did change was ring gap. We didn't change the rings. We used the original rings. We just put more gap in them for the boost and then put it back together. Lots of interesting things coming up on the dyno. The V12 will be the most interesting thing, I think. But Pontiac stuff with the Torque Storm and the Trophy 4-cylinder. I want to get the 4-cylinder 2.2 running again. ATV, then the 219 cam that I have would be good for you. Or I have some slightly bigger ones if you want to go bigger than that. I'll go watch the engine meshers video to get the information on that Hemi, but I will do the Play-Doh test to check clearance. Yeah, that's a good idea. Just did a stage 1 BTR and you love it. That's good. They have good stuff. I like Brian. Yep. Gary's saying, guys, remember the thumbs up. That's important. If Richard doesn't get the thumbs up, then he feels bad the whole day. Does everyone want more low speed torque for a truck application? 88% saying yes. ATV. My email should be on there, but I can give it to you right here. I usually put it in the description. Shadow Ops, you got your LS1 iron motor all ready to go? It's ready for swap. Do you have a run stand or anything that you're on? Have you seen 6-cylinder rotaries run? Why do so many hate rotary engines? I don't hate rotors. Are you meaning a 6 rotor? Because it's not cylinders, but I've seen 2 rotors and 3 rotors and 4. And I think I saw, did Rob have a 6 rotor? Somebody did. What cam would you suggest with a roots blower? You just got to tell me how much power you're wanting to make and what roots blower it is. The fact that it's a roots blower does nothing for the camshaft, in my opinion. We just pick the camshaft based on what you want the motor to do, like where you want it to run. Boost moves the curves up. Can curves be moved left or right? Yeah, they're moved left or right based on camshaft, based on intake manifold, and also based on the boost curve itself. So on a centrifugal blower, we don't make peak power at the same engine speed as we do NA because it has a rising boost curve. So that shifts it higher in the RPM if you're looking at it to the right. You can move it to the left with a falling boost curve, having lots of boost down low. And if the boost falls off, then it's going to basically shift the power the other direction. Rob's up to a 12 rotor. Okay. Yeah. I thought that I didn't know how far they've gone on the multi-rotor thing. I don't have a test stand, but rotating it over after doing the rockers, it all felt good. That's a good idea. When I'm putting pistons in, I like rotating it after each piston that I swap. I rotate around and go, oh yeah, that feels like it has the proper amount of ring drag. Does TIC Performance have good cams? All of the cams that I've run from TIC have worked well. And if you just look at the specs on camshafts, they do what that spec camshaft does. I think I have one of the TIC cams that we ran in the test. I have a used one that has a few dyno poles on it available. I like the guys from TIC. I'm using their intercooler right now on all the M90 testing. Nitrous moves it. Yeah, Nitrous moves it wherever you hit the nitrous. I've not seen too many people only hit the nitrous down low and then let it off. Although you could do that to spool turbos. That has happened. Not very many people on an NA motor hit it from 2,000 to 4,000 and then let off and then let it go from 4,000 to 6,000 or 7,000 and just run NA. If you hit it, you hit it and you're hanging on. You're down on the button the whole time until it stops. We've got 2 more minutes, so we'll get rid of our poll at 88%, saying yes. Give me some of that low-speed torque. We all like the torque. Interesting thing on the V12 is that this, I think that this, I was talking to the gentleman today. This might be the very first V12 LS. This was before the Australian guys, before all these other guys. And which would be cool because that makes it an even better story. But this one, because of push rod length, might not have been running on all the cylinders. It was actually driving around in a vehicle and was at SEMA and stuff. No one lets the nitrous button off. Yep. I'm putting a stage 2 BTR cam in my wife's 6.2 Yukon with a soft cam AFM DOD delete kit, also installing stainless headers, 1 7/8. This would be good. Yeah, that should work good. The stage 2 cam, I don't know which stage 2 cam you're talking about. Is it a stage 2 truck cam? Is it a stage 2 NA cam? You'd have to tell me which one of those it is to work with a stock converter. Is there any power loss from rear mount turbos compared to mounting them under the hood? Not at the same boost level. The thing that you get is a response rate change. Where would you look to spot aftermarket heads on a junkyard on the front, or just look for the aluminum shine? What I would look for if it's an LS is I would look for the factory casting numbers. If it doesn't have factory casting numbers on it, then it could be a aluminum head. I mean, a aftermarket head. That harmonic damper required a press on 240 foot-pounds of torque on the old bolt to get clearance of 175 on the end of the crank sound. I got 145, then 37 foot-pounds on the new bolt, plus 140 degrees. The factory torque on the damper bolt, and it also has, you can see it has sealant on the facing of the bolt too, which also stops it from wanting to rotate back off. But it's not going to anyways, because those things are really, really tight. Snap-on breaker bar did the final torque. Yeah, no, it's a serious deal. Just holding the motor from spinning is a serious deal. Scott, it's a truck cam, a stage 2 truck cam. Okay, I think you might be okay with the stage 2 truck cam on a 6.2 and a stock converter. Let's get a good tune guy. Should be able to help you out. Working on I got a bunch of guys obviously that on the camshaft video that I did with a bunch of used cams I have for sale. I still have some of those, so if you guys are interested in them. A lot of those are bigger than the 2 new cams I have, which is the Lowbuck truck, which is like a 212 cam. Then I have one step bigger, which is a 219 cam. Have those ready to go in stock. And then I have some bigger used ones that we've run dyno testing with. So if you're needing that kind of camshaft, please let me know. Send me an email. LMR released Ford heads, 170 CAS, 185 CNC, perhaps a test. Who's LMR? The modular Ford guys? Is that who it is? Engineer Masters Hemi Cam. 223, 235. That's the one that I did the video on, right? My buddy has an LS flex plate holder that mounts to the bell housing peg. Oh, that's a good idea. That's what we normally do. (2002) Yukon 5.3 automatic pulling a 25-foot tri-tune. Is that like a pontoon boat? It needs more power. A camshaft would be the way to go. Oh, Dylan, yours is a 17 motor. Is that an eagle-headed motor? Blue collar, I don't have anything in the 230 range. And Bobby, yes, LS1s are definitely worth rebuilding. I'm glad the peg didn't fail. Yeah, that would be bad. Chris, you want to know how much nitrous you should run? You should start at 100 and then work your way up on your 4.8 with your Truck Norris cam. Might need to get a cam for the 4.8 and not use the Truck Norris cam with the turbo setup if you have one that would fit the combination better. Yeah, the one step up on a 408, that 219 cam would be better. And then I also have some 220 stuff that would be good. So take a look at those. Like, look at the difference between a 206 and a 224 cam on that 175 horse cam deal. That will kind of give you an idea where the range is. Engine Master's video was a 17 motor. Mine's an 04. Yeah, most of the testing that I've done is on the earlier blocks. That 17 was one that the guys from Motor Trend did. But the 2 Hemi cams that I have, and they're for the earlier Hemis, not for the later ones. The 2 Hemi cams I have are a 224, 228 on a 114, 547, 550 lift. And then a 594, 578 lift, 225, 235, and a 114 plus 3. So those would be good performance Hemi cams. You just need valve springs for it. They shouldn't have any problem fitting piston to valve clearance. I got an LS1 F body. I asked because LS rings are toast, and a lot of people swap them with LQ9s and LM7s. A 6-liter would be an easy way to go. If the block is bad, you can swap an LM7 block, have it bored to 3890 so that you can use the LS1 diameter pistons, and you can use that bore size in the LM7. All that works. The 6-liter by itself is just going to be better because it's bigger. But as long as you can't overbore the LS1 block very much, so hopefully the cylinders are not damaged. And on that note, it is time to go, but I will see you guys all tonight.